Security. This woman needs to be removed immediately. She's clearly disturbed and trying to ruin my wedding day. The golden hour light filtered through the grapevines of Bella Vista Vineyard in Sonoma County, casting everything in that perfect warm glow that photographers dream about. String lights twinkled in the oak trees, and the scent of Cabernet grapes mixed with white roses filled the evening air. 200 guests in designer gowns and tailored suits sipped champagne under a sunset that looked like it had been painted specifically for this moment. But as I stood there at the edge of the vineyard in my plain gray dress, the only decent outfit I owned, bought from a Target clearance rack, watching my twin brother Connor about to marry a woman who had just called me a deranged stalker, I knew this picture-perfect wedding was about to be exposed for exactly what it was. A carefully composed fraud. Security. Victoria's voice cut through the elegant atmosphere like a blade. Her Vera Wang wedding gown probably cost more than I'd earned in the last 2 years. This homeless-looking woman crashed my wedding and is making wild accusations. Get her out before she does something violent. The guests turned to stare. I could see the judgment in their eyes, the way they looked at my worn shoes, my unstyled hair, the camera bag slung over my shoulder, old, battered, held together with duct tape. A photographer without a wedding invitation. How pathetic. But what they didn't know, what nobody in that vineyard knew except the people who had tried to bury me 4 years ago, was that I was supposed to be dead. Cremated. Scattered. Gone. And this is the story of how I came back from the dead to save my brother from making the biggest mistake of his life. Or at least, how I tried to. Before I go any further, I need you to do me a quick favor. Hit that subscribe button right now, give this video a thumbs up, and drop your country in the comments below. I'd love to know where you're watching from. It really helps this channel grow and bring you more incredible stories like this one. Thank you. My name is Emma O'Connor, and I want you to imagine the most humiliating moment of your life. Now multiply that by 1,000. Add the shock of seeing someone you love about to sign away their future to people who want to destroy them, and you'll understand what it felt like standing in that vineyard. Connor. My voice barely carried over the shocked whispers rippling through the crowd. My brother's face had gone completely white. He took a step toward me, then stopped, his wine glass slipping from his fingers and shattering on the stone pathway. No, this isn't. You're not real. Emma's gone. I scattered her ashes in the Charles River myself. I watched them disappear into the water. Those weren't my ashes, Connor. I touched the small scar above my left eyebrow, the one I'd gotten when we were 7, and I'd taken a baseball bat to the face protecting him from our neighbor's son. I'm right here. I'm alive. And I'm not letting you marry this woman. Victoria stepped between us, her perfectly made-up face contorted with rage. This is insane. Darling, call the police right now. This woman is clearly mentally ill. She probably read about your sister's tragic death online and is impersonating her for God knows what sick reason. Money, probably. These people always want money. But Connor wasn't looking at Victoria. He was staring at me, and I could see the recognition dawning in his eyes. The way I stood with my weight on my left foot because my right ankle had never healed properly after I'd sprained it working 3 jobs to keep him fed. The way I unconsciously touched my camera when I was nervous. The way I smiled, just slightly crooked because of the scar tissue from that baseball bat. The scar, he whispered. The one from when I saved you from getting your skull cracked open by Tommy Sullivan. I rolled up my sleeve to show the long white line on my forearm where Tommy's older brother had cut me with broken glass later that same summer, warning me to stay out of O'Connor business. But to understand how we got here, to understand why I'm standing in a vineyard 4 years after my own funeral, I need to take you back to where it all began. To the night our world ended. To the night I became everything to my twin brother, and he became my reason for surviving. The rain was coming down in sheets the night our parents died. I remember because Connor and I were sitting in my beat-up Honda Civic in the parking lot of Mass General Hospital in Boston, watching the emergency room doors and waiting for news that we already knew, in our hearts, wasn't going to be good. We were 18. We just graduated from South Boston High School 3 weeks earlier. Connor had a scholarship to study hospitality at Bunker Hill Community College. I had been accepted to Mass Art for photography, with enough financial aid that I might actually be able to afford it if I worked part-time. We had plans. We had futures. We had parents who loved us. And then, in one moment, on a rain-slicked road in Dorchester, a drunk driver ran a red light and took all of that away from us. "I'm so sorry," the doctor said, her scrub still spotted with our parents' blood. We did everything we could. The impact was just too severe. Connor's hand found mine in the darkness of that hospital parking lot. We were twins. We'd shared a womb, shared a birthday, shared everything. But in that moment, I became the older sibling by the 12 minutes I'd been born first. I became the strong one. I became the one who had to hold us together. The funeral was 3 days later. St. Augustine's Church in Southie, the same church where we'd been baptized, where we'd made our first communion, where our parents had gotten married 20 years earlier. The entire Irish Catholic community of South Boston turned out. Dad had been a beloved figure, Patrick O'Connor, brilliant software engineer who'd never forgotten where he came from, who'd helped neighbors fix their computers for free, who'd bought rounds at Sully's pub every Friday night. But after the funeral, after the wake, after the casseroles stopped coming and the sympathy cards stopped arriving, that's when we learned the truth about family. Aunt Catherine showed up at our apartment in Southie exactly 1 week after we buried our parents. She was Dad's older sister, a corporate lawyer who worked for one of those big downtown firms with offices in the financial district. She wore a Chanel suit that probably cost more than our monthly rent and looked at our small 2-bedroom apartment like she was visiting a third-world country. "We need to talk about your father's estate," she said, not bothering to ask how we were doing, not bothering to offer condolences beyond the perfunctory card she'd sent. Her husband Richard was with her. Investment banker. Slicked back hair. Rolex watch. The kind of guy who measured his worth in zeros on a balance sheet. "Dad's estate?" Connor asked. He'd been Dad's executor. "There's not much. The life insurance barely covered the funeral. This apartment is a rental. The car is paid off, but it's 10 years old. There's maybe $15,000 in savings." Catherine smiled. It wasn't a warm smile. "Exactly. Which is why your father's intellectual property needs to be managed by someone who understands its potential value." "I don't understand," I said, feeling ice forming in my stomach. "What intellectual property?" Richard pulled out a folder. "Your father's algorithm. The AI learning model he developed in 2003 while working at Technova Systems. According to the patent records, he retained full ownership after leaving the company. It's been sitting dormant for years. Because it didn't work very well back then," Connor said. "Dad told us about it. The technology wasn't advanced enough. He said it was basically worthless." "Was worthless," Catherine corrected. "But with the current boom in artificial intelligence, with companies desperately seeking foundational algorithms to build on, your father's work is suddenly very, very valuable. We've already had preliminary offers in the range of $20 million. The number hung in the air like smoke. $20 million. Connor and I looked at each other, minds racing. "That's ours then," I said. "Connor's and mine. We're Dad's only children." "In theory, yes," Catherine said. "But you're both 18 years old with no business experience, no understanding of intellectual property law, no ability to negotiate with billion-dollar corporations. You need a guardian to manage the estate until you're 25. That's standard Massachusetts law for estates of this size." "A guardian?" Connor's voice was shaking. "We're legal adults. You're legal adults with no college degrees, no jobs, no assets, and no ability to protect yourselves from being taken advantage of," Richard said coldly. "The court will appoint a guardian whether you like it or not. The question is whether that guardian is family who has your best interests at heart, or some state-appointed stranger who will bleed the estate dry with fees." "And you want to be our guardians," I said, understanding flooding through me like cold water. "You want to control Dad's algorithm." "We want to protect you," Catherine said. But her eyes said something else entirely. They said, "We want what's ours, and you're just obstacles in the way." That night, Connor and I sat in our apartment trying to figure out what to do. We called the lawyer our parents had used for their will, a kind older man named Mr. Murphy who'd known Dad since they were kids in Southie. He looked over the documents Catherine had left and his face grew grave. Kids, I'm not going to lie to you. They're not wrong about the law. Because of the size of the potential estate, the court will likely appoint a guardian for financial decisions until you're older. And blood relatives get priority. If you fight Catherine on this, you'll spend everything you have on legal fees and probably lose anyway. So we just let her steal our father's life's work? I demanded. Mr. Murphy sighed. I didn't say that. I said you need to be smart. Let her become the guardian. Let her make the deals. But document everything. Save every email, every text, every conversation. And the moment you turn 25, you fight like hell to get what's rightfully yours. It wasn't what we wanted to hear. But it was the truth. For the next 7 years, Connor and I survived. We didn't live, we survived. And I made damn sure that my twin brother, my best friend, my other half, would have every opportunity our parents had wanted for him. I gave up mass art. I gave up photography as anything more than a dream I whispered to myself late at night. Instead, I worked 3 jobs to keep Connor in school. My first job was at a print shop in Cambridge, making copies and running printing presses from 6 a.m. to 2 p.m. The work was mindless and the pay was terrible, but it was steady. My second job was waitressing at an Irish pub in Southie from 4 p.m. to midnight. The tips were decent on weekends, and the owner, Maggie O'Brien, was kind enough to feed me shift meals so I could save money on groceries. My third job was photographing events on weekends. Weddings mostly. I'd bought a decent DSLR camera from a pawn shop for $300, taught myself photography from YouTube tutorials and library books, and built a small client base through word of mouth. It wasn't glamorous work. I was the discount photographer that people hired when they couldn't afford the professionals. But it kept the lights on. Connor, meanwhile, threw himself into becoming everything Dad had dreamed for him. He studied hospitality at Bunker Hill, then transferred to UMass Amherst on scholarship to study enology, the science of wine. He worked at local restaurants, learning from sommeliers, developing his palate, dreaming of the day he'd work in the great vineyards of California. On weekends, when I wasn't photographing weddings, we'd sit in our tiny apartment and Connor would describe the wines he was learning about. The terroir of Burgundy, the bold complexity of Napa Cabernets, the elegant subtlety of Oregon Pinots. Someday, Emma, he'd say, his eyes lighting up the way they used to when we were kids. Someday, I'm going to be the head sommelier at a 3 Michelin star restaurant. And I'm going to buy you the best camera money can buy. The kind real photographers use. And you're going to shoot for National Geographic, and I'm going to tell everyone that my sister is famous. You're going to be amazing, baby brother, I'd tell him. I was born 12 minutes before him and never let him forget it. You're going to change the world, one perfect wine pairing at a time. In 2015, when Connor was 25 and had just been offered a position at a prestigious winery in Napa Valley, something happened that changed everything. I was cleaning out some of Dad's old boxes in our storage unit. We'd kept everything, unable to let go of the physical remnants of our parents' lives, when I found an old leather notebook tucked inside a box of Dad's college textbooks. Inside were pages and pages of Dad's handwriting, code snippets, algorithm notes, and tucked in the very back a letter. To my children, if you're reading this, it means I'm gone and you found this notebook. I want you to know about the AI algorithm I developed. I called it Neural Weave. When I created it in 2003, the technology wasn't ready for it. But I always believed that someday, when computers got powerful enough and machine learning advanced far enough, Neural Weave would be the foundation that could change everything. If that day comes, remember this. I created it for you. For your futures. For your children's futures. Not for corporations. Not for money. For family. Protect it. Use it wisely. Make me proud. I love you both more than algorithms can calculate. Dad. Tears were streaming down my face as I read his words. And then I did what I should have done years ago. I took the notebook to Mr. Murphy. He read it carefully, then looked up at me with eyes full of concern. Emma, do you know what your aunt has been doing with the algorithm? She's the guardian. She's been fielding offers, negotiating deals. We're supposed to get full control when Connor turns 25 next month, and I turn 25 in July. Mr. Murphy pulled up something on his computer. According to the public filing records I can access, Catherine signed a licensing deal 6 months ago with a company called Apex Dynamics. The deal gives them exclusive rights to Neuralweave for 10 years, in exchange for $15 million. $15 million? I stood up. Connor, and I haven't seen a penny of that. Because it went into a trust that Catherine controls. Technically, she's following the law. The money is being managed for your benefit. But Emma, Apex Dynamics is a shell corporation. I traced the ownership. It's registered in the Cayman Islands. The real owners are hidden behind layers of legal entities. What does that mean? It means your aunt sold your father's algorithm to someone who doesn't want anyone to know they own it. And I'd be willing to bet that she got a lot more than $15 million for it. She probably got a percentage of future profits that'll never show up in any paperwork you can access. My hands were shaking. Can we fight this? You can try. But Catherine is a corporate lawyer with unlimited resources. You're a waitress and a part-time photographer. The legal battle alone would cost hundreds of thousands of dollars. Even if you won, it would take years. And by then, who knows what condition the asset would be in. So she gets away with it? Mr. Murphy leaned back in his chair. Not necessarily. But you need to be smart about this. Document everything you've found. Don't tell Catherine you know anything. Wait until you both turn 25 and the guardianship legally expires. Then you can make your move with full legal standing. But I couldn't stay quiet. That was my mistake. I confronted Catherine in her office in downtown Boston. Marched right in past her secretary and demanded to know what she'd done with Dad's algorithm. She looked at me with cold amusement. I've been managing your inheritance exactly as the court ordered. You'll receive a full accounting when the guardianship expires. You sold it to a shell company. You're hiding the real buyers. You're stealing from us. Her expression hardened. You have no idea what you're talking about. Now get out of my office before I call security. I left. But I'd made a terrible mistake. I'd shown my hand. 2 weeks later, everything fell apart. It was a Tuesday morning in April when Connor called me, and I knew immediately something was catastrophically wrong. His voice was shaking in a way I hadn't heard since the night our parents died. Emma. Oh God, Emma. Where are you? I'm at work. At the print shop. What's wrong? They just called me. Aunt Catherine called me. Emma, they found your body. The print press kept running. The world kept turning. But I stood frozen, phone pressed to my ear, trying to understand words that made no sense. What are you talking about? I'm right here. Connor was crying now, deep gasping sobs. They said you had a mental breakdown. That you were found in your apartment. That you'd taken pills. They said by the time the paramedics got there, you were gone. They said there was nothing they could do. Connor, I'm talking to you right now. I'm alive. The doctor said the stress of everything, of working so hard, of the stuff with Aunt Catherine. They said you'd been having hallucinations. Paranoid delusions. They said they found journals where you were writing about people following you, about conspiracies. They said you'd stopped taking antipsychotic medications. I've never taken antipsychotic medications. Connor, listen to me. This is fake. This is Aunt Catherine trying to. The line went dead. I tried calling back. It went straight to voicemail. I tried texting. No response. I called Mr. Murphy, but his secretary said he was in court and couldn't be reached. And then, as I stood there in that print shop trying to figure out what the hell was happening, 3 men walked in. Emma O'Connor? The first one said. He was tall, white, with the kind of expressionless face that professional security people have. You need to come with us. Who are you? He pulled out a wallet and flashed some kind of ID too quickly for me to read. We're with the crisis intervention team. Your family has expressed concerns about your mental health and your safety. We need you to come with us to be evaluated. I'm not going anywhere with you. The second man moved to block the door. Ma'am, we can do this the easy way or the hard way. But you're coming with us. It's for your own safety. My coworker Jerry was watching this unfold from behind the counter, his eyes wide. Emma, maybe you should go with them, he said nervously. If your family is worried. Traitor, I thought. But I could see I didn't have a choice. 3 large men, one of me, in a cramped print shop with no back exit. Fine. But I'm calling my lawyer. You can make all the calls you want from the facility, the first man said. They took me to a building in Waltham that looked like a medical center, but felt like a prison. Private psychiatric hospital. The kind where rich families send inconvenient relatives. A doctor, at least, a man wearing a white coat who claimed to be a doctor, evaluated me in a small, windowless room. Emma, I'm Dr. Harrison. I understand you've been under a lot of stress lately. I'm under stress right now because I've been kidnapped. No one has kidnapped you. Your aunt, who is your legal guardian, has expressed serious concerns about your mental health. She's provided documentation showing a history of increasingly erratic behavior, paranoid ideation, conspiracy theories, conflicts with family members. That's all lies. He made a note on his clipboard. Do you often feel that people are lying about you? Making up stories to hurt you? It was a trap. Every answer I gave, he twisted into evidence of mental illness. By the end of the evaluation, I was being recommended for immediate involuntary commitment. They put me in a locked ward, took my phone, my wallet, my camera, put me in paper scrubs, told me it was for my own safety. For 3 days, I was trapped in that place. And during those 3 days, I realized what Aunt Catherine's plan was. She was going to have me declared mentally incompetent. Once I was officially crazy, she could maintain control over my half of Dad's estate indefinitely. Connor would turn 25 and get his half, but my half, the half that could expose what she'd done, would remain locked away with me. Except I wasn't going to let her win. On the 4th day, during a shift change, I saw my opportunity. The ward door had an emergency exit that set off alarms if opened, but it also created chaos. And in chaos, there are opportunities. I waited until the night nurse was distracted with another patient who was having a genuine mental health crisis. Then I pulled the fire alarm. Alarms blaring. Lights flashing. Staff running. And in the confusion, I slipped out through the emergency exit with a group of people being evacuated. I was barefoot, wearing paper scrubs, with no money and no phone. But I was free. I ran. I ran through the streets of Waltham at 2 in the morning, expecting any second to be tackled by security or police. But I made it to a 7-Eleven where a tired clerk let me use the phone. I called the only person I could think of who might help me. Someone I'd helped years ago when he had nothing and no one. Raj Patel answered on the 3rd ring. Emma? Raj's voice was thick with sleep. Is that you? Your number came up as unknown. Raj, I need help. I'm in trouble. Bad trouble. Where are you? I told him. And without asking a single question about why I was standing in a 7-Eleven parking lot at 2 a.m. in hospital scrubs, he said, Stay there. I'm coming to get you. 45 minutes later, Raj pulled up in his old Toyota Corolla. He wrapped me in a jacket, handed me a pair of his wife's shoes, and drove me to his apartment in Malden. You want to tell me what happened? He asked as his wife Priya made me tea in their tiny kitchen. And I told them everything. The algorithm. Aunt Catherine. The conspiracy. The psychiatric hospital. The fake death. Everything. When I finished, Raj and Priya looked at each other with an expression I couldn't quite read. We believe you, Raj said finally. Because 4 years ago, someone tried to do something similar to me. Not the same, but similar. He told me his story then. Raj had come to America from Mumbai in 2010 on a work visa, employed by a tech company in Cambridge. He was brilliant, computer engineer, specializing in hardware systems. But his visa was tied to his employer, which gave them enormous power over him. When the company started engaging in illegal practices, using H-1B visa workers as essentially indentured servants, forcing them to work 80-hour weeks, threatening deportation if they complained, Raj tried to blow the whistle. They retaliated by claiming Raj had violated his visa terms. Falsified documents. Called immigration. Raj was facing deportation back to India, where he'd have nothing. He'd sold everything to come to America. His wife Priya was pregnant with their first child. They were terrified. That's when I met them. I'd been photographing a wedding, and Priya was one of the guests. We got to talking. She told me what was happening. And I couldn't walk away. I used the little money I'd saved to hire an immigration lawyer. A real one, not some con artist. I helped them document the company's illegal practices. I testified on their behalf. It took 6 months, but Raj's visa status was resolved and the company was investigated. You saved our lives, Raj said quietly. We would have been sent back to nothing. Our daughter would have been born stateless. You gave us everything. Now, for years later, Raj owned a small electronics repair shop in Malden. It wasn't much, but it was honest work and he was building something real. And he had connections, other immigrants, other people who'd been helped by the underground network of good people who looked out for each other when the system failed them. You can't go back to your life, Raj said. If your aunt thinks you're dead or crazy, going back just puts you in danger again. But Connor thinks you're dead, Priya said gently. I'm sorry, Emma, but that might be the safest thing right now. If they think you're gone, they won't come looking for you. You can regroup. Make a plan. They're going to send Connor ashes, I realized. Fake ashes. Just like they did with everything else. Then let them, Raj said. Right now, you need to disappear. Really disappear. New name, new city, new life. Just for a while. Until you can figure out how to fight back. So that's what I did. Raj had a cousin in Seattle who needed help at his photography studio. Not shooting, I wasn't ready to risk being recognized through my photography style, but managing the business side. Scheduling, bookkeeping, editing. Within a week, Emma O'Connor was officially dead. Her obituary ran in the Boston Globe. Cause of death listed as suicide. A closed casket funeral was held at St. Augustine's. Connor scattered ashes, pig bones, probably, just like in the story I'd heard about someone else in a similar situation, in the Charles River. And Sarah Miller was born. Plain name. Plain life. Living in a studio apartment in Seattle's Capitol Hill neighborhood. Working at Aperture Photography Studio. Keeping her head down. Watching from 3,000 miles away as her brother's life continued without her. For 4 years, I lived as a ghost. I couldn't use my real name. Couldn't contact Connor directly. Couldn't go back to Boston. Couldn't even take photographs under my own name because my style, my eye, might give me away to anyone who knew me. But I never stopped watching over Connor. I created fake social media profiles. I followed his friends. I tracked his career from a distance, watching through screens as he lived the life I'd sacrificed everything to give him. I watched him move to Napa Valley and take a position as assistant sommelier at a prestigious winery. I watched him get promoted to head sommelier. I watched him become sought after, successful, exactly what Dad had always known he could be. I also watched Aunt Catherine and Uncle Richard swarm around him like vultures circling wounded prey. They paid off his student loans that I'd been secretly helping with through anonymous payments from Seattle. They helped him buy a car. They invited him to family dinners and holiday gatherings. They played the role of loving aunt and uncle who just wanted to support their orphan nephew. And Connor, grieving and alone and desperate for family, believed them. But most importantly, I watched the algorithm. I'd kept copies of everything I'd found in Dad's notebook. From Seattle, using my access to Raj's contacts in the tech world, I hired lawyers, good ones this time, paid for with the money I'd been saving for 4 years, to quietly monitor the situation. What they found chilled me to the bone. Apex Dynamics, the shell company that had bought Neuralweave, had sub-licensed the algorithm to multiple tech companies. It was being used in facial recognition systems, in predictive policing software, in social media algorithms that manipulated user behavior. And the company behind Apex Dynamics? A venture capital firm where Uncle Richard was a managing partner. They hadn't just stolen Dad's algorithm. They'd weaponized it. And they were making hundreds of millions of dollars from it. But they couldn't sell it outright. They couldn't develop it fully. Because legally, the patents still belonged to Connor and me. As long as we were alive and competent, we could challenge their deals at any time. Catherine's guardianship had expired when Connor turned 25. Mine would have expired at the same age if I'd been alive and sane. So they'd solved their Emma problem by making me legally dead and medically incompetent. But Connor was still a threat. He could still discover the truth. He could still fight back. unless they found a way to control him permanently. That's when Victoria Ashford entered the picture. 3 months ago, I was doing my routine check of Connor's social media when I saw the posts. Photos of Connor with a beautiful blonde woman at a wine tasting in Napa. More photos of them at dinner in San Francisco. Then, a month later, photos of them at a family gathering at Aunt Catherine's house in Boston. Victoria Ashford, 28 years old, Stanford MBA, working in tech consulting. Daughter of Marcus Ashford, who just happened to be Uncle Richard's business partner at the venture capital firm. She'd appeared in Connor's life like a perfectly staged photograph. Beautiful, charming, sophisticated. Everything Connor thought he wanted. And I knew, with absolute certainty, that she was the final piece of their plan. I dug deeper. Through Raj's network and my lawyers, I discovered the truth. Victoria's job wasn't real tech consulting. She worked for companies that needed to extract information or gain access to assets through relationship infiltration. Corporate espionage, basically, but legal enough to avoid prosecution. Her job was to marry Connor. Once married, she'd convince him to sign updated estate documents that gave her access to his half of Dad's intellectual property. Then, after a respectable year or two of marriage, she'd divorce him and claim half of everything, including his rights to neural weave. Combined with the rights they'd already stolen from me by declaring me incompetent, they'd have complete control. When Connor announced his engagement 3 months ago, when I saw the photos of the proposal at sunset over the Napa vineyards, I knew I was out of time. It was time for Emma O'Connor to come back from the dead. Planning my return took 8 weeks of meticulous preparation. I couldn't just show up at the wedding. Security would throw me out before I got close to Connor, and Aunt Catherine would have me arrested for fraud or trespassing or whatever charge they could manufacture. I needed proof. I needed witnesses. I needed a plan that would expose the truth in front of everyone. First, I contacted Mr. Murphy, the family lawyer. I called him from a secure line and identified myself with information only the real Emma could know. He was shocked, horrified, and immediately on my side. "We've been trying to reach you for months," he said. "Connor has been asking questions about the estate. He's starting to suspect something isn't right. But Catherine keeps stonewalling him with legal jargon." Good. That means he's not completely under her spell. Mr. Murphy helped me gather the legal documentation I needed. Proof of my identity. Medical records showing I'd never been diagnosed with any psychiatric condition. Evidence that the crisis intervention that took me to that hospital was illegal. Documentation of Aunt Catherine's financial dealings with the algorithm. Next, I reached out to the FBI's white-collar crime division. It turned out they'd already been investigating Apex Dynamics and the venture capital firm for securities fraud. My information about the stolen intellectual property opened up a whole new avenue of investigation. Special Agent Torres became my contact. She was sharp, professional, and deeply angry about what had been done to me and Connor. "We've been trying to build a case against these people for 2 years," she told me during one of our secure video calls. "But they're sophisticated. They hide behind shell corporations and offshore accounts. Having an actual victim willing to testify changes everything. Will you be able to arrest them? If you can get them on record admitting to what they've done, absolutely. But Emma, I need you to understand something. These people tried to have you declared legally dead and insane. They'll try to discredit you any way they can. You need to be prepared for that." I've been preparing for 4 years. Finally, I contacted Raj and told him my plan. "It's dangerous," he warned. "If something goes wrong." "Something already went wrong," I said. "For years ago. I'm not letting them take my brother too." Raj called in favors from his network. Other immigrants who'd been helped along the way. People who owed him. People who understood what it meant to fight corrupt systems. On the day of the wedding, I had everything I needed. Legal documents proving my identity, medical records disproving the mental illness claims, financial records showing Aunt Catherine's theft, FBI agents ready to move on, my signal witnesses prepared to testify, and most importantly, recorded conversations. Agent Torres had given me a wire. Over the past 6 weeks, I'd used fake identities to get close to people in Aunt Catherine's orbit. A journalist interested in tech investing. A documentary filmmaker researching AI ethics. Each conversation had revealed a little more of the conspiracy. But the most damning evidence came from someone I never expected, Uncle Richard himself. He'd been having an affair with his secretary. Sloppy, stupid, but typical. The secretary, feeling guilty and used, had agreed to record their conversations when Agent Torres approached her. In those recordings, Richard laid out the entire plan. How they'd manipulated Connor. How they'd gotten rid of me. How Victoria was the final piece. How they'd soon have complete control of an algorithm that was generating $1 billion a year in revenue. The twins never understood what Patrick created, Richard's voice said on the recording. He was brilliant but naive. He should have sold it to a real company, not left it to kids who couldn't protect it. We're just doing what should have been done from the beginning. Listening to him reduce my father's life's work, my life's sacrifice, to a business opportunity that we were too stupid to deserve made me want to scream. But instead, I smiled. Because now I had everything I needed. The wedding was scheduled for Saturday evening at Bella Vista Vineyard in Sonoma County. Connor had chosen the location because he'd fallen in love with their wines, with the way the sunset painted the grapevines gold, with the romance of it all. He thought he was starting his perfect life. He had no idea he was walking into a trap, both theirs and mine. I flew into San Francisco the day before the wedding. Raj came with me, along with his teenage daughter Anaya, the baby who'd been born American because I'd helped them stay in the country all those years ago. They were my family now. The family I'd chosen. Agent Torres and her team were already in position, posing as guests and catering staff. Mr. Murphy had arranged for my legal documentation to be ready. Everything was set. That night, I stood in my hotel room looking at myself in the mirror. I'd changed so much in 4 years. My hair was longer, streaked with gray I didn't bother to hide anymore. My face was thinner, harder. I looked like someone who died and clawed her way back to life. Because that's exactly what I was. Tomorrow, I would walk into that vineyard. I would face my brother who thought I was dead. I would confront the family that had tried to bury me. And I would expose the truth in front of 200 witnesses. I touched the small camera hanging around my neck, a vintage Leica that Raj had given me as a gift. To capture the truth, he'd said. Photographers know that the perfect shot requires patience, timing, and the courage to press the shutter at exactly the right moment. Tomorrow, I would take the most important photograph of my life, the moment truth came into focus. The day was perfect. Of course it was. Victoria had hired the best wedding planner money could buy. Every detail was flawless, from the white roses woven through the grapevines to the string quartet playing Vivaldi as guests arrived. I waited until the ceremony was about to begin. I'd timed it perfectly, dramatic enough to stop the wedding, but not so early that security could easily remove me before I said what needed to be said. I walked through the vineyard entrance wearing my plain gray dress, my old camera bag over my shoulder, looking exactly like what Victoria would later call me, a homeless-looking woman who didn't belong. The guests were already seated in rows of white chairs facing the altar. Connor stood there in his tuxedo, looking handsome and happy and completely unprepared for what was about to happen. Victoria was still in the bridal suite, probably doing final touch-ups on her makeup. I walked down the side of the aisle, my worn shoes crunching on the gravel path. People started to notice. Whispers rippled through the crowd. And then Connor saw me. The look on his face, I'll remember it for the rest of my life. Shock. Disbelief. Hope. Fear. All crashing together like waves against rocks. Emma? His voice cracked on my name. That's when we returned to the moment where this story began. Victoria appearing, calling security, demanding I be removed. The guests staring. The confrontation beginning. But now, you know how we got here. Now you understand what's at stake. Connor, I said, my voice carrying across the vineyard, do you remember what Dad used to tell us? About how photographs don't lie, but photographers can choose what truth to show. He nodded, unable to speak. These people, I gestured to Aunt Catherine and Uncle Richard, who were now standing at the front of the crowd, their faces pale, have been choosing what truth to show you for 4 years. They've been composing a photograph of your life with you as the subject who doesn't even know he's being manipulated. This is insane. Catherine's voice was sharp. Connor, don't listen to her. This woman, whoever she is clearly disturbed. I smiled. Whoever she is? I turned to face the crowd. My name is Emma Catherine O'Connor. I was born at 11:47 p.m. on March 15, 1990, at Mass General Hospital in Boston, 12 minutes before my twin brother Connor Patrick O'Connor. Our parents were Patrick Michael O'Connor and Siobhan Mary O'Connor, née Sullivan. We grew up at 42 Dorchester Street in South Boston. We were baptized at St. Augustine's Church. We graduated from South Boston High School in 2008. I walked closer to Connor. And 4 years ago, when I discovered that our aunt had stolen our father's intellectual property and sold it to a shell corporation for hundreds of millions of dollars, she had me kidnapped, falsely imprisoned in a psychiatric hospital, and declared legally dead. The crowd erupted in shocked murmurs. Victoria had emerged from the bridal suite and was staring at me with pure hatred. Connor, this woman you're about to marry is Victoria Ashford. Her father, Marcus Ashford, is Uncle Richard's business partner. She doesn't love you. She's been paid to marry you, to gain access to your half of Dad's algorithm, and then to divorce you and take half of everything you own. That's a lie, Victoria shrieked. Darling, she's obviously mentally ill. Your aunt told me about your sister's tragic struggle with paranoid delusions. Did she also tell you about the recordings? I pulled out my phone and Raj, who was in position by the sound system, connected it to the vineyard speakers. Richard's voice filled the air. The twins never understood what Patrick created. He was brilliant but naive. He should have sold it to a real company, not left it to kids who couldn't protect it. Then Catherine's voice. Emma was becoming a problem. She was asking too many questions. We needed a permanent solution. Richard again. The psychiatric hold was brilliant. Once she's declared incompetent, we can maintain control of her half indefinitely. Catherine and Connor? He's grieving isolated. He'll believe whatever we tell him. Especially once Victoria makes him fall in love with her. The recording continued, laying out their entire conspiracy in their own words. The theft of the algorithm. The fake death. The manipulation. The plan to use Victoria to complete their control. Connor had gone completely white. He looked at Victoria, who was frantically shaking her head. It's fake, she said desperately. Audio can be manipulated. It's not fake, a new voice said. Special Agent Maria Torres stepped forward, FBI badge held high. And you're all under arrest. What happened next was chaos. Beautiful, righteous chaos. FBI agents emerged from their positions among the guests and catering staff. Aunt Catherine tried to run but was stopped before she made it 3 steps. Uncle Richard actually tried to argue, claiming diplomatic immunity or some other nonsense that his lawyer brain thought might save him. Victoria turned to Connor one last time. I did love you, she said, and I almost believed her. For just a moment, there was something real in her eyes. But it wasn't enough to stop her from being handcuffed and led away. Through it all, Connor stood frozen at the altar where he'd been about to make the biggest mistake of his life. The guests were being asked to stay for questioning. Some were crying. Some were on their phones. Some were recording everything on their cameras, and I had to laugh at the irony. Photographs capturing the moment truth came into focus. Finally, Connor moved. He walked toward me slowly, like he was approaching a ghost he was afraid might disappear. Is it really you? He whispered. I nodded, not trusting my voice. And then my twin brother, my best friend, the person I'd sacrificed everything for, pulled me into his arms and held me so tight I could barely breathe. You're alive, he sobbed into my hair. You're alive. I thought I'd lost you forever. I'm here, baby brother. I'm here and I'm never leaving you again. We stood there in the middle of that vineyard, surrounded by FBI agents and shocked wedding guests and the ruins of a ceremony that would never be completed, and for the first time in 4 years, I felt like I could breathe. But what I didn't know then, what I couldn't see coming, was that getting Connor back was only the beginning of the story. Some happy endings are just intermissions before the real tragedy begins. The legal aftermath took 6 months to fully resolve, but it was faster than any of us expected. When you have the FBI's white-collar crime division working your case, and when the evidence is as damning as recordings of the conspirators planning everything in their own words, justice comes swift. I stood in the federal courthouse in Boston on a cold December morning, watching as the sentences were handed down. Catherine O'Connor, 12 years in federal prison for fraud, theft of intellectual property, conspiracy to commit kidnapping, and falsifying medical documents. Richard Whitmore, 15 years for securities fraud, money laundering, and racketeering through the venture capital firm. Victoria Ashford, 8 years for conspiracy to commit fraud and corporate espionage. Marcus Ashford got 10 years for his role in the scheme. The judge's words still echo in my mind. The defendants showed a callous disregard for family bonds and human dignity, motivated purely by greed. They destroyed lives, falsified deaths, and corrupted systems meant to protect vulnerable people, all for financial gain. Their crimes strike at the heart of what we hold sacred: family, trust, and justice. Connor and I sat together in that courtroom, finally free. The legal battles over Dad's intellectual property were resolved quickly once the criminal cases concluded. Neural Weave and all associated rights were officially transferred back to Connor and me as the rightful heirs. But more importantly, we had each other back. Those first few months after the wedding that never was, Connor and I had to rebuild our relationship slowly. For years of thinking someone is dead creates a distance that can't be closed overnight. We'd sit in my hotel room, I stayed in San Francisco while the legal proceedings continued, and talk for hours. I told him about Seattle, about living as Sarah Miller, about watching his life from 3,000 miles away. He told me about the grief of losing me, about how hollow his success had felt without me there to share it with, about the ways he'd tried to fill the hole I'd left with wine and work and the false comfort of family that wasn't really family. "I'm so sorry I believed them," he said one night, tears streaming down his face. "I should have known something was wrong. I should have questioned it." They were professionals, Connor. They knew exactly how to manipulate someone who was grieving and alone. But you would have seen through it. You always saw through people's bullshit. I smiled sadly. I saw through it because I had you to protect. You didn't have anyone protecting you. That's the difference. With the settlement from the lawsuit and the return of control over Neural Weave, Connor and I suddenly had access to wealth we'd never imagined. The algorithm was generating massive revenue, nearly $1 billion a year by that point, licensed to tech companies around the world for everything from medical diagnostics to climate modeling. We could have done anything, gone anywhere, retired at 34 and never worked another day in our lives. But that's not who we were. That's not how Dad and Mom raised us. I used my share to establish the Siobhan O'Connor School of Photography in Boston. Not a fancy art school, we had plenty of those, but a program that offered free training to young people from low-income families who wanted to learn photography as a trade. Product photography, wedding photography, event photography. Skills that could earn them a living wage and maybe, just maybe, grow into something more. We partnered with local community colleges. We provided cameras and equipment. We connected graduates with internships and job opportunities. Within the first year, we'd trained 50 students. Within 3 years, over 200. My favorite part was teaching the occasional workshop myself. Standing in front of a room of eager students, showing them how light and shadow could tell a story, how a single photograph could capture truth that 1,000 words might miss. This isn't just about taking pictures, I'd tell them. It's about seeing what's really there. About showing people truths they might not want to see but need to understand. Connor, meanwhile, started a foundation that provided scholarships to students from disadvantaged backgrounds who wanted to study enology, viticulture, or hospitality management. He also invested in sustainable wineries that prioritized environmental stewardship and fair labor practices. He never went back to Napa. Too many memories of Victoria, of the life that had been a lie. Instead, he worked with wineries across California, Oregon, and Washington as a consultant, helping them improve their programs while building something that actually mattered. On weekends, he'd come to Boston and we'd have dinner at our old apartment in Southie. We'd bought the building and renovated it, but kept our family's old unit exactly as it had been. We'd sit in the kitchen where Mom used to make soda bread, and we'd talk about Dad and Mom, keeping their memories alive. One evening, about a year after the wedding that never happened, Connor poured us both a glass of wine, a beautiful Oregon Pinot Noir that he'd been saving for a special occasion. To Dad, he said, raising his glass, who created something amazing and left it to us not because we deserved it, but because he believed we'd do good with it. To Mom, I added, who taught us that family is about who shows up for you, not who shares your DNA. And to you, Emma. Connor's voice cracked. For never giving up on me. For sacrificing everything. For coming back from the dead to save me. We clinked glasses and drank, and for the first time since our parents died, I felt like we were going to be okay. I should have known it wouldn't last. I should have known that money changes people in ways they don't even recognize until it's too late. I should have known that the brother I'd saved was about to become someone I didn't recognize. It started small. Little things I told myself were just stress or the pressure of managing sudden wealth. About 2 years after we'd reclaimed our inheritance, Connor started making comments that made me uncomfortable. Emma, you've done amazing work with the photography school, he said during one of our foundation board meetings. But maybe it's time to let professional administrators handle the day-to-day. These nonprofit types understand scaling in ways that, well, in ways that photographers might not. I stared at him. I've grown the program from 0 to 200 graduates. I think I understand scaling just fine. Of course. I just mean that you could focus on the creative side, the teaching, and let MBAs handle the business operations. The MBAs he wanted to hire were friends of his from the wine industry. People who saw nonprofit work as a line on a resume, not a mission. I shut down the idea, but I noticed that he'd started making decisions about our shared foundation investments without consulting me. Nothing illegal, nothing that violated our partnership agreement, but a pattern of acting like his business judgment was inherently better than mine. It's neural weave that generates our real wealth, he said during one particular tense conversation. The photography school is wonderful, Emma, truly. But let's not pretend it's a business in the same way that AI licensing is a business. It's not supposed to be a business, Connor. It's supposed to help people. And it does. But someone has to make the hard decisions about resource allocation and ROI and strategic growth. Someone has to think about the foundation's long-term financial sustainability. Someone. Not us. Not we. Someone, meaning him. The real breaking point came when I discovered what Connor had done with Neural Weave. Our agreement had been simple. We both had to approve any major licensing deals or changes to how Dad's algorithm was being used. It was in writing, signed by both of us, legally binding. But Connor had found a loophole. He'd signed preliminary agreements with a Chinese tech consortium called Beijing Digital Futures. They wanted exclusive rights to use Neural Weave for consumer technology applications, which sounded innocent enough until I dug into what that actually meant. Surveillance systems. Social credit scoring. Predictive behavioral control. The kind of technology that authoritarian governments use to monitor and control their populations. When I confronted Connor in his office in San Francisco, he barely looked up from his laptop. How could you do this? I demanded, slamming the contract down on his desk. Do you have any idea what this technology will be used for? I know exactly what it will be used for. Consumer applications that will improve millions of lives. It's surveillance, Connor. It's authoritarian control. Dad created Neural Weave to help people, not to help governments spy on them. He finally looked at me, and there was something in his eyes I'd never seen before. Something cold. Dad created Neural Weave in 2003, and it sat and used for 20 years because he was too idealistic to monetize it properly. We have an opportunity to generate $3 billion over the next 5 years from this deal. $3 billion that we can use to expand our foundations, to help more people, to do more good. Blood money, Connor. $3 billion of blood money. Oh, please. He stood up, and I realized he was angry. Actually angry at me. Every technology can be misused, Emma. Cars can run people over. Cameras can invade privacy. Algorithms can be biased. That doesn't mean we refuse to innovate. It means we trust that the good uses outweigh the bad. There is no good use of technology designed to oppress people. You're being naive. This is the real world. This is how business works. I stared at this man, this stranger wearing my brother's face. When did you become someone who justifies oppression because the check is big enough? His face flushed red. I'm not justifying anything. I'm being realistic. I'm making smart business decisions. Something you wouldn't understand because you're too busy playing artist with your little photography school. The words hit me like a slap. My little photography school? You know what I mean. No, I don't. Please, explain to me what you mean. Explain how the program that's changed 200 people's lives is little. Explain how teaching people skills that let them support their families is playing artist. Emma, he ran his hands through his hair, a gesture I remembered from when we were kids, and he was frustrated. Look, I'm grateful for everything you did for me. I really am. But we're not struggling anymore. We're not kids fighting to survive. We're adults managing a billion-dollar asset portfolio. And that requires a certain level of sophistication and business acumen that not everyone has. That I don't have. Say it. That's not what I said. It's exactly what you said. I'm just a photographer who got lucky. I don't have your business degree. I don't have your sophisticated understanding of international licensing deals. I should just stay in my lane and let the grown-ups make the real decisions. Connor's jaw tightened. If you want to block the Beijing deal, you can. We have equal voting rights. But I think you're making a mistake based on emotion rather than rational analysis of the opportunity. You're right. I am making a decision based on emotion. I'm angry that my father's life's work is being used to hurt people. I'm sad that my brother has become the kind of person who thinks $3 billion is worth compromising every value we were raised with. We're done with this conversation. I walked toward the door, then turned back. You know what the saddest part is, Connor? Aunt Catherine and Uncle Richard wanted to control you to steal from you. But they failed. You know who succeeded in changing you into someone Dad wouldn't recognize? You did that all by yourself. I blocked the Beijing deal, as was my legal right under our partnership agreement. Connor couldn't move forward without my signature. He didn't speak to me for 3 months. During that time, he started meeting with lawyers about dissolving our partnership, about restructuring our foundation agreements, about finding ways to reduce my decision-making authority over Neural Weave. Friends tried to tell me he was just going through something, that the pressure of managing so much wealth was getting to him, that he'd come around. But I knew better. I'd seen this before. Money doesn't corrupt people, it reveals who they really are when they don't have to hide it anymore. And Connor, freed from poverty and struggle and the need to be grateful, was revealing himself to be someone who valued power and wealth more than he valued people. The final confrontation came at a gala fundraiser for one of our foundation programs. Connor had invited investors, tech executives, and venture capitalists. People who saw our foundations as pet projects of wealthy siblings, not as missions that mattered. I gave a speech about the photography school, about one of our recent graduates who'd landed a job at National Geographic. I talked about her journey from working minimum wage jobs to achieving her dream, and how she told me that our program gave her back the future she thought poverty had stolen. Connor gave a speech right after me, about innovation and disruption and leveraging technology for scalable impact, about how our foundation was uniquely positioned to generate both social returns and financial returns, about his vision for expanding into new markets and maximizing our portfolio's growth potential. It was the kind of speech that made investors excited to write checks. It was also completely devoid of any mention of actual human beings whose lives we were changing. Afterward, a venture capitalist approached me at the bar. "Your brother is brilliant," she said. "Really understands the ecosystem. Does he understand the people?" She looked confused. The people? The people we're supposed to be helping. The students. The families. The human beings whose lives our foundation exists to improve. Oh, right. Of course. She smiled uncomfortably and moved away. Connor found me a few minutes later. "Can we talk?" We went out to the balcony overlooking San Francisco Bay. The city lights sparkled like stars, and I thought about how beautiful everything looked from a distance, how all the pain and struggle disappeared when you were high enough above it. I'm filing papers to restructure our partnership, Connor said without preamble. I've consulted with lawyers, and they believe we can create a framework where you maintain ownership interest and financial participation, but operational decisions are made by a single managing partner. Let me guess. You. Someone has to be in charge, Emma. These constant conflicts are preventing us from maximizing our impact. Our impact. Is that what we're calling it now? What would you call it? I'd call it your bank account. Your ego. Your need to be seen as a tech genius rather than just someone who inherited his father's work. Connor's face hardened. I've tried to be patient with you. I've tried to understand your perspective. But you're stuck in the past, Emma. You're still thinking like we're poor kids from Southie who have to fight for every scrap. We're not poor anymore. We have resources and opportunities that 99% of people will never have. And I intend to use those resources strategically, not sentimentally. Dad used those resources to create something that could help people. You're using them to become everything he'd be ashamed of. Don't you dare, Connor's voice rose. Don't you dare tell me what Dad would think. You're not the only one who loved him. You're not the only one who carries his legacy. Just because you sacrificed more doesn't mean you get to be the moral authority on everything. You're right. I'm not the moral authority. But I am the person with enough spine to say no when someone offers us billions of dollars to help oppressive governments spy on their citizens. And I'm the person with enough vision to see beyond small-scale charity to actual systemic change. But you wouldn't understand that, would you? Because at the end of the day, you're just a photographer. You see individual moments, individual people. You don't see the big picture. There it was. The thing he'd been dancing around for months. His fundamental belief that his way of seeing the world, cold, calculating, focused on scale and return on investment, was inherently superior to mine. You're right, Connor. I am just a photographer. I see individual people. I see their faces. I see their pain. I see their joy when they achieve something they never thought possible. And I refuse to sacrifice those individual people for your abstract notion of systemic change that somehow always seems to involve you getting richer and more powerful. I turned to leave. Emma, wait. No. You've made your position clear. File whatever papers you want. Take me to court. Try to push me out of the foundation we built together. But I'm not going to stand here and let you rewrite history. I didn't sacrifice 12 years of my life. Didn't survive being declared dead, didn't claw my way back from hell to save you so that you could become a technocrat who thinks poor people are just numbers on a spreadsheet measuring your impact. I left him there on that balcony, surrounded by city lights that made everything look beautiful from a distance. It was the last time I would see my brother alive. 3 months after that confrontation, on a Tuesday night in March, my phone rang at 11:47 p.m. It was the exact time I'd been born 36 years earlier. The first moment of my existence. I've always remembered that detail, 11:47 p.m., because Mom used to joke that I'd been in such a hurry to meet the world that I couldn't wait 12 more minutes for midnight. Connor had come at 11:59 p.m., taking his time, she'd say. Always the thoughtful one. When I saw his name on my phone screen at that exact time, 11:47 p.m., I knew something was catastrophically wrong. Emma. His voice was shaking. Oh God, Emma. I need help. Where are you? What's wrong? The voice in the background, I realized someone was with him. Shouting. Threatening. Connor? Connor, talk to me. Beijing Digital Futures, he said, the words coming fast and desperate. They're not just a tech consortium. They're a front for the Chinese government's surveillance apparatus. And worse. Emma, they're using Neuralweave for 4 things I didn't know about. Horrible things. Political persecution. Tracking dissidents. They showed me footage. People being arrested because the algorithm identified them as threats. People disappearing. I felt ice spreading through my chest. You signed the deal. I signed preliminary agreements. I thought I could negotiate terms that would prevent misuse. But there are no terms, Emma. They own it now. They're using it however they want. And when I tried to back out, when I said I wanted to renegotiate, the shouting in the background got louder. Then I heard Connor cry out in pain. Connor. They said I know too much. They said I'm a liability. Emma, I tried to go to the FBI, but they have people inside. They knew I was going to talk. They. The line went dead. I called back immediately. Straight to voicemail. I called again. And again. And again. Then I did what I should have done years ago. I called Agent Torres. She was at my apartment in Boston within 20 minutes, 2 other FBI agents with her. We've been monitoring Connor's communications, she said grimly. We knew he was in deep with some dangerous people, but we didn't have enough evidence to move. Emma, I need you to tell me everything. I told her about the Beijing deal. About Connor's change. About our fight. About the phone call. Where is he? He mentioned Beijing Digital Futures. He was scared. He said they told him he was a liability. Agent Torres made several phone calls in rapid succession. Then she looked at me with an expression that made my blood run cold. Connor's car was found 30 minutes ago in the parking lot of his San Francisco office building. Security footage shows him being forced into a black SUV by 3 men at approximately 10:30 p.m. Oh God. I sank into a chair, my legs suddenly unable to hold me. We have to find him. We have to. We're doing everything we can. But Emma, you need to prepare yourself. These people, they're professionals. If they see Connor as a threat. She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't have to. For the next 6 hours, I sat in my apartment surrounded by FBI agents, watching them work their phones and computers, tracking leads, following digital breadcrumbs. Hoping for a miracle. The miracle didn't come. At 6:15 a.m., Agent Torres received a call. She listened for a moment, her face draining of color. Then she looked at me. They found him. 3 words. But I knew from her tone that the next words would destroy me. I'm so sorry, Emma. He's gone. Connor's body was found in the bay near Pier 39 in San Francisco. The official cause of death was listed as drowning. The police report suggested suicide, a man depressed over business failures, financial troubles, personal demons. But I knew. Agent Torres knew. Anyone who looked at the evidence knew. Connor had been beaten before he was thrown into the water. There were bruises on his ribs consistent with professional interrogation techniques. Marks on his wrists showing he'd been restrained. And security footage that had mysteriously corrupted for the exact 90-minute window when everything happened. Beijing Digital Futures had gotten what they wanted from Connor, full access to Neuralweave with no one left to question how they were using it. And they'd eliminated the threat he posed by knowing too much about their operations. The investigation went nowhere. The men in the black SUV disappeared. The digital trail went cold. Beijing Digital Futures was, predictably, a shell corporation that dissolved within days of Connor's death. The real people behind it were ghosts protected by international boundaries and government connections that made them untouchable. Did we get justice? Agent Torres asked me in the sterile conference room where we reviewed the case one final time. No, we didn't. And I'm sorry, Emma. I'm so incredibly sorry. I nodded, feeling nothing. Feeling everything. Feeling like I'd died 4 years ago in that psychiatric hospital, and everything since then had been a dream that I was only now waking up from. The funeral was small. Just me, Raj and his family, Agent Torres, Mr. Murphy, and a handful of Connor's colleagues from the wine industry who'd actually cared about him as a person rather than as a business opportunity. We buried him next to our parents in Cedar Grove Cemetery in Dorchester. The headstone read, Connor Patrick O'Connor 1990 to 2026, beloved son and brother, some visions are too pure for this world. I stood by his grave after everyone else had left, looking down at the fresh earth that covered my twin brother. I saved you, I whispered. I gave up everything to save you. And you were supposed to be better than this. You were supposed to prove that good people can succeed, that money doesn't have to corrupt, that Dad's legacy could change the world in beautiful ways. But the wind just carried my words away, and Connor didn't answer, and I was left standing there alone with the knowledge that sometimes you can save someone's life, but you can't save them from themselves. The will reading happened 3 weeks after the funeral. Connor had updated his estate documents 6 months before he died, back when he'd been trying to restructure our partnership, back when he'd been convinced that he needed sole control of everything. The lawyer, a Stanford law type that Connor had hired specifically because he wasn't Mr. Murphy, read through the documents with professional detachment. Connor's share of Neuralweave licensing rights went into a trust, managed by a board of directors. Connor had named me to the board, along with 3 venture capitalists and 2 tech executives. In other words, he'd found a way to dilute my control even in death. His personal wealth, the billions he'd accumulated from licensing deals and investments, was split between various charities and foundations. Some of it went to programs we'd created together. Most of it went to new initiatives he'd been developing. Tech entrepreneurship programs, innovation funds, things that sounded impressive in boardrooms but helped very few actual people. There was a personal letter. The lawyer handed it to me in an envelope with Connor's handwriting on the front, Emma, to be read privately. I waited until I was alone in my hotel room to open it. Dear Emma, if you're reading this, I'm gone. And knowing you, you're probably angry at me for how I've structured everything. You think I betrayed Dad's vision. You think I let money corrupt me. You think I became everything we used to hate. Maybe you're right. But here's what you need to understand. You spent your whole life seeing me as someone who needed saving. The little brother you had to protect. The kid who would have ended up in foster care if not for your sacrifice. And that version of me, the one who was grateful and humble and pure, that version was real. But he was also a victim. Someone who only existed because he had no other choice. Someone whose dreams were always smaller than his sister's martyrdom. When we got the money, when I finally had the power to make my own choices, I realized something. I didn't want to be saved anymore. I didn't want to be the grateful recipient of your sacrifice. I wanted to be someone who made big, bold, world-changing decisions. Even if those decisions had costs. Even if they disappointed you. I'm sorry I'm not the person you wanted me to be. I'm sorry I couldn't stay pure enough to justify everything you gave up for me. But Emma, you need to understand something. You didn't save me so I could live the life you wanted me to live. You saved me so I could live my life. And I did. For better or worse, I lived it on my terms. I love you. I always will. Even when you hated what I was becoming, I loved you. Thank you for giving me life. Twice. Connor. I read the letter 3 times. Then I folded it carefully and put it in my bag. He was right about one thing. I had seen him as someone who needed saving. Someone whose life justified my sacrifice. Someone who would prove that good things happen to good people if someone just loves them enough. But he was wrong about everything else. I didn't save him so he could live my life or his life. I saved him because that's what family does. That's what love is. You protect people not because you expect them to become perfect, but because they matter to you regardless of what they become. Connor's mistake wasn't choosing his own path. It was choosing a path that destroyed other people along the way. And no amount of rationalization about big, bold, world-changing decisions could change the fact that his choices had consequences. People in China being arrested because of his algorithm. Dissidents disappearing. Families destroyed. His life. His terms. His body in a coffin at 36. After the will reading, I made a decision that surprised everyone, including myself. I liquidated everything. The Siobhan O'Connor School of Photography? I transferred it to a non-profit board that could run it without me. Gave them enough endowment funding to operate for the next 50 years. Made sure the current teachers and staff were protected with generous severance and retirement packages. The foundations Connor and I had built together? I restructured them, handed operational control to professional administrators who actually cared about the missions, and stepped away from all leadership positions. My share of Neuralweave licensing revenue? I signed over 90% of it to a trust dedicated to helping victims of surveillance technology and authoritarian government persecution. The remaining 10% went into a simple index fund that would generate enough income for me to live quietly without ever having to think about AI algorithms or tech licensing or billion-dollar deals. Within 3 months, I had dismantled everything Connor and I had built together. Not out of spite, not out of grief, but because I finally understood something that had taken me 36 years to learn. Some inheritances are curses disguised as blessings. Dad's algorithm was supposed to secure our future. Instead, it destroyed our family. The money was supposed to let us help people. Instead, it revealed that even good people can be corrupted when they have enough zeros in their bank account. And trying to honor Dad's legacy by building foundations and programs and initiatives had turned into a full-time job of managing wealth rather than actually helping people. I was done. 6 months after Connor's funeral, Raj found me in Portland, Oregon, living in a studio apartment and working at a small camera repair shop. "You can't just disappear again, Emma," he said as we sat in a coffee shop overlooking the Willamette River. "Too many people depend on you. Too many lives have been changed by what you built." "I built it for Connor," I told him. "I built it to prove that his life mattered, that my sacrifice meant something, that love could create something beautiful even out of tragedy. But he's gone now. And everything I built couldn't save him from himself." "So you just give up? After everything you survived?" "I'm not giving up. I'm accepting reality. The reality is that I spent 28 years of my life trying to save someone who, in the end, didn't want to be saved. Or at least, didn't want to be saved in the way I thought he should be saved." Raj was quiet for a moment. "Anaya is 18 now. Did you know that?" I smiled despite myself. I'd watched Raj's daughter grow up from a distance. Sent birthday cards under fake names. Watched her graduate high school. Seen photos of her acceptance to Berkeley where she was studying computer science. How is she? She's brilliant. And you know what she wants to do? She wants to develop AI systems that help refugees navigate immigration systems, that protect vulnerable people instead of exploiting them. She says she was inspired by her guardian angel, the woman who saved her parents and made sure she could be born American. I felt tears starting to form. "Raj, you think Connor's death means your life's work was meaningless. But what about Anaya? What about the 200 photographers whose lives you changed? What about the thousands of people who will benefit from the foundations you built, even if you're not running them anymore?" "Those things happened. They're real. But I'm tired, Raj. I'm so incredibly tired of trying to make meaning out of loss." He reached across the table and took my hand. "Then rest. Take time. Live quietly. But don't disappear completely. Don't let the fact that Connor made bad choices erase all the good you've done." I returned to the East Coast 6 months later, but not to Boston. Too many memories. Too many ghosts. Instead, I settled in Providence, Rhode Island. Close enough to visit Connor's grave when I needed to. Far enough to start over. I got a job at a small photography studio that specialized in restoration work, taking old, damaged photographs and digitally repairing them, bringing lost moments back to clarity. It felt appropriate somehow. I lived in a small apartment in the College Hill neighborhood. I made a few friends. I dated occasionally, though nothing serious. I volunteered at a local community center teaching basic photography to kids. It was a quiet life. A small life. The kind of life that Connor would have called wasting your potential. But it was mine. And for the first time since I was 16 years old, I wasn't living for someone else. Wasn't sacrificing for someone else. Wasn't trying to save someone else. I was just living. On the evening of my 40th birthday, I drove to Cedar Grove Cemetery in Dorchester. It was the first time I'd been back to Boston in 2 years. I stood by Connor's grave, looking at the headstone that had weathered 4 years of New England seasons. "Happy birthday, baby brother," I said quietly. "You're still 12 minutes younger than me, even in death. I'll never let you forget that." The cemetery was empty except for me. Spring was just starting to arrive, crocuses pushing through the last patches of snow, the promise of renewal after a long, hard winter. I thought about everything that had happened since the night our parents died. 28 years of sacrifice. For years of being dead. 2 years of having Connor back. For years of watching him become someone I didn't recognize. And now, for years of living with his absence. People ask me sometimes, the few people who know my real story, if I regret it. If I would do things differently. The answer is complicated. Do I regret sacrificing my teenage years and my 20s to keep Connor safe and educated? No. Because at the time, it was the right thing to do. He was a child. I was his only family. What else could I have done? Do I regret coming back from the dead to save him from marrying Victoria? No. Because that marriage was a trap that would have destroyed him even faster than his own choices eventually did. Do I regret not being able to save him from himself? Every single day. But here's what I've learned, standing here by my brother's grave on my 40th birthday. You can love someone completely, sacrifice everything for them, fight impossible battles to protect them, and still lose them. Not because you failed. Not because you didn't love them enough. But because in the end, every person makes their own choices. And some people choose paths that lead to destruction, no matter how much you try to light a different way. I learned that money doesn't corrupt people, it reveals them. It shows you who they really are when they don't have to pretend anymore, when they don't have to be grateful anymore, when they have the power to become whatever they want. And sometimes, what they want isn't beautiful. I learned that inheritances, whether they're property, money, or intellectual property, are almost always curses disguised as blessings. They promise security, but deliver conflict. They promise legacy, but deliver division. They promise future, but often destroy present. Dad's algorithm was supposed to be his gift to us. Instead, it was the thing that got him killed, got me declared dead, and ultimately got Connor murdered. I learned that photographs and wine have something in common. They both capture moments in time. But photographs reveal truth when exposed to light, while wine develops flavor in darkness. Connor chose darkness. He chose the deals made in shadows, the compromises hidden from scrutiny, the path that looked sophisticated, but was really just corruption in an expensive bottle. Most importantly, I learned that coming back from the dead doesn't guarantee a happy ending. Sometimes resurrection is just the first chapter of a longer, more complicated story about loss and love and the limits of both. I didn't save Connor. I gave him a chance. He chose what to do with it. And that has to be enough. Because the alternative, believing that my entire life was wasted, that every sacrifice was meaningless, that love is pointless if it can't prevent tragedy, that way lies madness. So instead, I choose to believe this. I loved my brother. I protected him when he needed protection. I gave him opportunities he wouldn't have had otherwise. And for 20 years, before money and power and algorithms corrupted him, he was everything I hoped he'd be. That's not nothing. That's actually everything. I still work at the photo restoration studio in Providence. I still teach photography to kids at the community center. I still live in my small apartment and live my quiet life. But once a year, on the anniversary of the wedding that never happened, I do something that probably seems strange. I drive to Bella Vista Vineyard in Sonoma County. I walk through the same grapevines where I confronted Connor and Victoria and Aunt Catherine. I stand in the spot where the altar had been, where Connor was supposed to say, "I do," to a woman who would have destroyed him. And I take a photograph. Not of anything special. Just the vineyard at sunset. The golden light filtering through the leaves. The way truth looks when it comes into focus. I have 4 of these photographs now. One from each year since Connor died. They're almost identical, same location, same time of day, same composition. But if you look closely, you can see the differences. The vines growing slightly taller each year. The light shifting as the seasons change. The small details that mark the passage of time. This year, on my 5th visit, something different happened. A young woman approached me as I was packing up my camera. She was in her early 20s, dressed casually, with kind eyes. "Excuse me, are you Emma O'Connor?" I froze. I don't use my real name much anymore. "How do you know who I am?" She smiled nervously. "I'm Keisha Washington. I graduated from the Siobhan O'Connor School of Photography 3 years ago. You changed my life." I relaxed slightly. "How so?" "I was working 3 minimum wage jobs, trying to support my mom who has MS. I had no future, no hope. Then I got accepted to your program. You gave me a camera. You taught me how to see. And now I work for National Geographic. I'm a professional photographer. I support my mom. I have a life I never thought possible." She pulled out her phone and showed me her work. Stunning photographs of wildlife, of landscapes, of human faces that told entire stories in a single frame. "You're incredibly talented," I told her. "Because you believed in me when no one else did. Because you created something that gave people like me a chance." We talked for a while longer. She told me about her career, her dreams, her gratitude. And when she finally left, I realized something. Connor's story ended in tragedy. My story is still being written. But the stories of people like Keisha, people whose lives were changed by something I built during those brief years when I thought I could save my brother by saving the world, those stories are still unfolding. I didn't save Connor. But maybe I saved someone else. Maybe that has to be enough. So now I'm going to ask you something. And I really want you to think about it before you answer. If you were in my position, if you had sacrificed everything for someone you loved, only to watch them become someone you didn't recognize, only to lose them to choices they made despite everything you did to save them, what would you have done differently? Would you have let Connor sign that Beijing deal? Would you have fought harder? Would you have walked away sooner? Would you have never come back from the dead at all? Or is there something I missed? Some moment where I made the wrong choice? Some way I could have changed the ending? Because I've spent 4 years asking myself these questions, and I still don't have answers. Maybe you do. Drop your thoughts in the comments. Tell me where I went wrong. Tell me what you would have done. Tell me if you think some people just can't be saved, or if I gave up too soon. I'd really love to hear from you. Thank you so much for listening to my story. For staying with me through all the twists and turns. For caring about what happened to a woman who died and came back to life twice, once literally, once figuratively. Before you go, please do me a favor. Hit that subscribe button. Give this video a thumbs up. Share it with someone who might need to hear this story. We post videos every single day on this channel, so there are plenty more incredible stories waiting for you. Check out the other videos. You might find a story that speaks to you even more than mine did. And remember, photographs don't lie, but they only show the moments we choose to capture. Wine develops in darkness, but it's meant to be enjoyed in light. And some algorithms, whether they're computational or emotional, are too powerful to be controlled by good intentions alone. Take care of yourselves. Take care of each other. And if you love someone, tell them. While you still can. We'll see you in the next story. Bye.